Welcome. Thank you all for being here. We are really excited. Welcome to the 5th Annual Gluten-free Expo and also the 1st Annual Education Session of the Gluten-free Expo. We are very thankful to be here, and a big thank you to Sandy Warness and IGU and Children's National Medical Center for co-sponsoring this education session, and also a big thank you goes to Bob Redmill to Bob's Red Mill to make this all possible as well. We have a great lineup today of a number of different speakers that's going to touch upon a number of different topics of just kind of the state of the industry of celiac disease. So without further ado, we will start it off with Laura Hashiguchi, who is the Celiac Disease Program Dietitian, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about Gluten-free 101. Thanks.
All right, good morning. Like Courtney said, my name is Laura Hashiguchi, and I have the privilege of being the dietitian with the Children's National Celiac Program. And so today I'm just going to kind of run through with you a little bit about Gluten-free 101. This may be some familiar information for some of you all, maybe new for some others. So we're just hoping to get the basics out right in the beginning. So we're going to run through a little bit about what gluten is, where it's found, how you can identify and know that you're eating safe products. So just to start off a little bit, what is gluten? Gluten is the protein that is found in wheat, barley, and rye. It's made up of the smaller proteins, gliadin and glutenin, so together they make the protein gluten. Gluten does have a purpose. It provides elasticity, shape, and texture to dough products, and so as a dough is manipulated, more gluten is formed, and the word gluten actually means glue in Latin, so the gluten acts as kind of a glue to hold that dough product together. And so for individuals with celiac disease, it's really important to know where gluten is found and how you can avoid it, because even a little bit of gluten, even just a small amount, a couple crumbs, can actually be harmful and cause damage to the small intestine. So one of my jobs is that I oftentimes meet with newly diagnosed celiac patients and their families, and we talk about what gluten is and just go over how you can make sure that you're eating a gluten-free diet, because again, it is really important. So gluten is going to be found in any product that contains wheat, barley, or rye. When people think of gluten, a lot of times they start off by thinking of products that are very obviously wheat-based, like breads, pastas, muffins, cereals, baked goods, crackers, tortillas, so on and so forth. There are also, other products that are made with wheat. For example, fried foods oftentimes are coated in flour, so things like chicken nuggets or, fried fish. So a lot of times those are also going to contain gluten. A lot of children I meet with are sometimes sad to hear a lot of their favorite treats, even aside from, cookies and cakes, are actually going to contain gluten, sometimes like, candy bars like a Kit Kat or Twix, cookie dough ice cream, yogurt that has crushed up Oreos in it, and so on. So there really is, a pretty large list of foods that you find gluten in. Gluten also can be found in oats. This is something you may have heard a little bit of controversy about, because oats in and of themselves are gluten-free, but it does turn out that in the processing they're almost always contaminated, so unless they are certified gluten-free oats, we do not consider them to be gluten-free. Gluten can also hide in some foods as well. I put up here sauces and marinades, and that's just one example of a food that, isn't necessarily bread-based or starch-based, but actually can oftentimes contain gluten. A good example of this is soy sauce, which, unless it's a specified gluten-free soy sauce, almost always does contain wheat. A lot of marinades as well. A good example, very common example, is teriyaki sauce. Most of the time is made with that gluten-containing soy sauce, and so therefore it does. Even some other salad dressings, there's definitely a long list out there. And surprisingly, people oftentimes think of food products when you first think of gluten, but there's actually some non-food items as well that you really do need to be aware of. And the first one I always bring up is medications, multivitamins, or any sort of nutrition supplement, because they can have gluten in their filler products. So it's really important for individuals with celiac disease or who are maintaining a gluten-free lifestyle to, make sure you're talking with the pharmacist or checking through all the ingredients on any supplements or medications you might be taking. Also, gluten can be found in some cosmetic products. A really common example would be lip balms, lipsticks, and lip glosses. And so you want to be really careful because while gluten can't travel through your skin, you are putting it on your lips and inevitably you're ingesting it into your GI tract. So that's another thing that you're going to want to watch out for. Along with even some of those other products like hand lotion, shampoos, sunblocks, especially with very young children, getting it on the hands and then putting your hands in your mouth sometimes can lead to some accidental ingestion of gluten. So it's really important to be able to identify that as well. All right, so knowing how many different products contain gluten, a lot of times the question is, well, how can I figure out whether or not the product that I'm picking up contains gluten? Because at this point, manufacturers are not required to declare the presence of gluten on their product. So whereas for some allergens like peanuts or soy, you might see on the label contains, peanuts, it's not going to be that case for gluten. You're not going to see contains gluten. So it's going to be really important to know how to read an ingredient label and to be able to identify gluten-containing ingredients. Yeah, so the best way that you're going to be able to find gluten, whether or not gluten's in a product, is by reading through the ingredient list. So I put this up here, not to, again, have you try and memorize it, but just so you can be aware that there are many different ingredients other than just wheat or gluten that are going to be listed that are containing. This full list is available on the Children's National Celiac Program website. And a lot of times when I'm working with a newly diagnosed family, I actually encourage them to take a picture of this list on their phone and carry it around with them. So that way it makes it a little bit easier when you're out in the grocery store. All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about what foods contain gluten and where it is found, I'm going to talk with you a little bit about which foods do not contain gluten, which is really my favorite thing to talk about. It's much more fun to talk about what you can eat rather than what you can't eat. So I always like to start out by encouraging individuals to eat as many naturally gluten-free foods as possible. So when I say naturally gluten-free, I mean a food that in its natural form without any modification is just standardly gluten-free. So you could go to your standard grocery store, keep buying, probably the same product you've been using for years, and it's still gluten-free. The first one I always like to bring up is fruits and vegetables, that almost all fruits and vegetables are going to be gluten-free. Sometimes people are surprised to learn that the starchy vegetables like potatoes and corn are in fact gluten-free, and I think that's because sometimes we confuse starch with gluten, and that's not the case. So any fruit or vegetable is going to be in its fresh natural form is going to be gluten-free. Another one is going to be meat, fish, and poultry. So again, think chicken, salmon, beef, turkey, so on and so forth. They're all going to be gluten-free, unless, of course, they're breaded, and additionally some lunch meats can sometimes not be gluten-free, but the fresh and natural gluten-free meats are going to be gluten-free. Along with some of those other protein sources like eggs and beans and tofu are going to be gluten-free. And so as you can see, it's really not an issue usually for individuals with celiac disease to find protein sources because there's a great extensive list out there. Also, most dairy products like milk and cheese are going to be naturally gluten-free, along with yogurt, although you do need to be cautious about some of the flavorings and sweeteners in yogurt, so you are going to want to check through that ingredient label. But for the most part, most dairy products are gluten-free. Again, nuts are going to be another great natural gluten-free food, although you are going to want to be cautious of any sort of coating that might be on the nuts, but the nuts naturally themselves are gluten-free. Also, rice, brown or white, I'm sure everybody knows that, is a great staple, that is often used for those who are avoiding gluten. All right, additionally, there's also many great gluten-free flours out there, including, just to name a few, brown rice flour, tapioca flour, almond flour, coconut flour. It's really a very extensive list. And those flours can be used to make, any of your favorite products that contain gluten, you can make gluten-free. So up here I put a list of some of, a huge list of safe gluten-free foods, and I put it up there. Many of them are grains. And again, I put it up there not for you to memorize or try and write down, but just so that you can see that this list is actually longer than that list that I had up a minute ago of the ingredients that contain gluten. So it's just a little bit of an encouragement of how many great products there are out there. And I also always point this list out to newly diagnosed families because some of the products that are gluten-free tend to surprise people. So it's just always good to make sure that you know some of those ingredients that you might not naturally identify. And again, this list is going to be also available on the Children's National Celiac Program website. So when you're looking through the grocery store and you're looking for gluten-free products, you may run across products that are labeled or say on their packaging that this product is gluten-free. And I often get asked, can we trust that claim? So in August of 2013, the FDA did pass a law stating that for a manufacturer to label their product gluten-free, free of gluten, without gluten, no gluten, those 4 terms, it must have been tested to 20 parts per million or less of gluten, which is the level that we would consider to be safe. And that law went into effect in August 2014, so at this point that is a law that is being followed by manufacturers. It is a voluntary labeling, meaning that not every product that is gluten-free, like fruits, vegetables, things like that, they might not be labeled gluten-free because this is the manufacturer's choice to label a product that is gluten-free, but they cannot label a product that's not gluten-free to be gluten-free. So when I start working with families, a lot of times one of the questions I get asked is, can I eat well and really enjoy food while eating a gluten-free diet? And I always say that the answer is yes. There's absolutely many great options out there for a gluten-free diet. However, eating well and eating delicious foods isn't always necessarily the same thing as eating healthy on a gluten-free diet. And I'm sure that we've all, met people and, maybe even yourself that you're hoping to eat an overall healthier diet by going gluten-free. And that can be the case or it cannot be the case. Certainly there are many gluten-free products, gluten-free cookies and cakes and ice creams and things like that that are gluten-free but aren't necessarily the healthiest choice for us at every meal. So I always just like to run over how to eat well on a gluten-free diet to make sure that we're still getting all of our nutrients each day. So this actually really doesn't look any different than what I talk about with pretty much any patient or any individual with or without celiac disease, eating gluten-free or not eating gluten-free. We want you to think about your plate and think about trying to have half of what you eat every day be fruits and vegetables. And your plate may not look like this. It could be in a sandwich, it could be in a burrito, a soup. But we really want you to think about eating as many fruits and vegetables as you are other things. We really want you to be mixing up the colors, so having red, orange, yellow, green. There's different vitamins in each of the different color vegetables, so we want you to think about eating the rainbow. And with that other half of your plate, we want you to be splitting it between lean protein and gluten-free whole grains. So with the lean proteins, we're talking about things like chicken, lean beef, turkey, seafood, so on. And that's, really what we want you to be having that quarter of the plate. You might find in our kind of Americanized culture that we tend to make that protein about half the plate, and that's really not what we're looking for. We're really trying to increase those fruits and vegetables. So you notice to this point, we've filled up about 3/4 of our plate with foods that are naturally gluten-free, with the fruits, the vegetables, and the protein. So again, that's, as I'm saying, we really don't recommend anything different for those on a gluten-free diet in terms of overall health. Keep in mind that a lot of the foods we recommend are naturally gluten-free. And with that last quarter of your plate there, we want you to be eating whole grains. Now, when people think whole grains, their mind automatically jumps to whole wheat, and that's not the case at all. You absolutely can still be having whole grains on a gluten-free diet. And the benefit of whole grains, again, is that they're providing more fiber and more nutrients than refined grains would. So some examples of whole grains on a gluten-free diet would be brown rice, quinoa, gluten-free certified oats, and so on. So eating some of those gluten-free whole grains can allow you to still get the benefits, the health benefits of eating whole grains while still staying safe on your gluten-free diet. You also see that cup up there with dairy, and we do recommend 3 servings of dairy a day for any individual to be getting their calcium needs, and we especially find that to be very important in children. So we want you to be choosing low-fat or fat-free dairy, and that's going to be things like milk, cheese, and yogurt. Again, a lot of those naturally gluten-free products. And again, we really recommend for everybody, gluten-free or not, to try and limit those sweetened beverages or other concentrated sweets as much as possible. Again, juices, sodas, those are all going to be things that are typically gluten-free, but again, not the best choices for us every day. So as you can see, the recommendations for a healthy diet and a healthy overall lifestyle fit very nicely into a gluten-free diet, and it's very possible to eat very, very well and to be very healthy on a gluten-free diet. So again, with eating this well-balanced diet, eating from all the different food groups, people often ask me if their child should be taking a multivitamin while they're gluten-free, and if they're eating a well-balanced, well-rounded diet that follows this, it's not really necessary. All right, so we're actually going to go ahead and wrap it up, but thanks for your questions, and if you have more questions, we'll definitely be out at the Celiac Program booth afterwards, and we'd love to answer them. All right, thank you.